The Shark Deck.
I'm Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news. Late nights on strike from the late bots. I tried to sneak into the Kentucky Derby without a ticket, but I got caught. The security guard told me I can't just horse around like that. That is awful, late bot. This is why we need writers. One more. I saw a horse at the Kentucky Derby wearing a bow tie. Then I read his text messages and was like, oh my. That one's not bad. That one was half late bot, and I kind of punched it up a little. Dave Chappelle could have been in Forrest Gump. Now, the first time I read this story, I was like, wait, Dave Chappelle could have been Forrest Gump? What? No. He could have been in Forrest Gump. Totally different story. This from Looper. Chappelle was offered the role of Bubba Blue. The folks at Comedy Hype posted an old stand-up set by Dave Chappelle. In the set, Chappelle explains that his agent wanted him to take on the role of Bubba, thinking the opportunity could land him an Oscar. Chappelle read the script and immediately wanted to turn down the role. In the stand-up set, he says his decision was racially motivated. His joke, who could be dumber than Forrest Gump? His black friend, that's who. Lewis Black was on the Last Laugh podcast as recapped by the Daily Beast. Lewis turned 75 this summer and he said, I'd never considered myself old until the pandemic. Then I was told I was old. He doesn't think about his legacy. He never had children, so all he will leave behind is his work. And he says, I don't know if it matters anymore. I got more successful than I ever expected. So I find myself at this point wondering if I've stayed too long at the fair. Is it time to wrap it up? I'll stick with it as long as I can learn from the craft. He was scheduled to guest host The Daily Show, but, writer strike, so I don't know if that's going to happen now. Lewis said, to be honest, when they first started saying they were going to have guest hosts, I literally said, I want to be on. Can I sit in that chair once? I've been on the show 27 years. Could I please sit in the chair? As soon as they started talking about how they were going to have guest hosts, I was pretty ticked at that he wasn't on the list. He said, none of us were, none of the correspondents. And I just thought, come on, guys, throw a bone. And it really undermines, too, something that I felt about this show for years, which is it undermines the importance of the writers on that show. So it's not just who's sitting in the seat, it's the guys and women in the back room who are pumping out all sorts of stuff on a daily basis. Obviously, they started with some big names, and that was probably part of the plan, but now it's great seeing the correspondents in there. Roy Wood Jr., Jordan Klepper. I thought Roy did a terrific job. Jordan did a terrific job. They're all going to be really good. I'm not going to be good, but they're going to be terrific. Samantha Bee apparently was surprised nobody reached out to her. Lewis said, which I don't get. They reached out to Hassan Minhaj, and I'm not disparaging having these folks on. I think that's great. I just think they should have started with us, but I'm thrilled to be able to do it, and now he's not going to be able to do it. Writer strike. Here's what's interesting. Lewis does not write his stuff for The Daily Show. He doesn't even choose the topics for Back in Black. He said, no, they took it from me early on because a couple of producers on the show didn't feel like I belonged, and they didn't feel I was funny. They wanted a punchline rather than an attitude, but part of what's been my bread and butter as a comic is my attitude. The attitude gets the laugh. My initial reaction has always been confrontational when it comes to the workspace. I'm always like, I'm not going to take this stuff, and I'd walk away, and then I thought, I can't walk away. What am I thinking? I'm not going to walk away from this. You want to write it? Go ahead. What I had to do was take what they were giving me and put it in my own voice. So it was like an acting gig. Now all of them know my voice, so it's never a problem, and I love the way they write. Pace Magazine spoke to Scott Aukerman. He's been doing a little tour for his book and his 800th podcast, and he said, when I started, podcasting was in its nascent form. The only podcasts I knew were comedian hangout shows like Jimmy Pardo or Ricky Gervais. I thought my show might be that in the first week, and then I pivoted into interviewing comedians, sort of a proto-WTF. Then after the third week, the programming director said that show was boring, and he always thought I'd be doing comedy instead of talking about comedy. I was like, okay, that's a good note. So I swung into approaching it on like how Conan O'Brien would do a panel, but on a podcast. I'd have comedians on doing their jokes, and I would set them up. That was me not having incredible confidence in my own abilities, but I knew everybody's act really well, so I knew how to be a genial host who could throw to them. Around the 10th episode, Andy Daly was on, and he was doing a character. We got into a weird side conversation about a coat he had bought, and for me, that's when it came to life. It was less rote and a little less prepared, and he's such an incredible improviser, he was able to roll with it. So I left that show going, okay, that was really funny, and it gave me more to do. Around the same time, Paul F. Tompkins started doing characters, and he'd email me bullet points of what he was going to talk about for the first year so that I could be prepared. Anytime we'd go off on a tangent, it seemed like the most fun to me, and that's where the show kind of landed.
Hi, my name is TJ, and I host a daily radio show. I have a bunch of friends that join me for it every day, and believe it or not, we all still see hope in humanity. Are you one of these people too? We want to hang out with you. Just search for The TJ Show on your favorite podcasting platform, or join us at thetjshow.com. We would love to have you being hopeful about humanity with us. Here's a quick sample of what the show sounds like. Hey, welcome to The TJ. As you can tell, you need to hear more of it. Search for The TJ Show, and we can't wait to meet you.
The Charleston City Paper spoke to Jorge Kondabolu. He spoke about the pros and cons of releasing his film The Problem With Apu. Ari said, I feel like the conversation I had to start was useful to a lot of people. The documentary is used in college classrooms and high school classrooms. It has a value I certainly didn't anticipate when I made it. It certainly made a bigger imprint than I expected, so I'm grateful for the fact that I contributed to a conversation I value and that it really resonated with people. But at the same time, I'm not particularly happy with that kind of negativity I still get around it, especially from people who haven't seen it. It was just another thing they could bring up to say everybody's too sensitive, everybody's a snowflake, as opposed to watching the thing and coming up with reasons to disagree with it. Hari spoke about his relationship with Hank Azaria and said, the conversation I've had with Hank is very different from the conversation that's happening publicly, and that's because he's put a lot of work into thinking about the issues that I brought up. People also miss the fact that I'm a Simpsons fan. It's one of the big influences on my comedy. The idea that I don't get the show or I don't know what it's about, it's like, no, that's the thing. I try to make it nuanced. This from the perspective of somebody who loves the show and also feels weird about the fact that the character really kind of painted what my community looked like for the longest time. Hari said if he could go back in time and tell his younger self some advice, it would be to develop a thick skin. When you're going out there and trying to be honest about how you feel about the world, it means that a lot of people will disagree with you, and it's completely worth it because the laughter you get and the joy you bring by far outnumbers the feeling you have when people are being terrible. Every time I'm on stage, it's still this wonderful feeling that I'm performing for a bunch of friends I haven't met yet. That's what it feels like. We're not friends yet, but I feel like we're going to be friends because we're resonating. Jason Reitman is directing a film that follows the first night of Saturday Night Live. The film is set October 11th, 1975, the night of the SNL premiere. That week, the show's host George Carlin informed the show that he wouldn't do any sketches. Instead, he'd just do 4 stand-up monologues scattered throughout the show. Billy Crystal was supposed to do a bit on the show, and that was cut between dress rehearsal and air due to the show not having enough time for the routine. There were also the adult Muppets created just for that show. Yeah, that was a disaster. A film by Albert Brooks. And not much for the cast members to do unless you were Chevy Chase. One of the memorable bits from that premiere episode, the legendary Andy Kaufman Mighty Mouse routine. Today on the UK's Channel 5, unless you're watching the coronation of King Charles, it's Fawlty Towers, 50 Years of Laughs. That'll be on Channel 5 at 9:15 p.m. Over at Palace Intrigue, we'll be covering the coronation. Johnny Mac's got to work on a Saturday. Poor me. And that's your comedy news for today. Follow the show for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your shows. See you tomorrow.
Once in a generation, a new British royal dynasty takes shape. I am Mark Francis, host of Palace Intrigue, a daily podcast about the royal family, and the only place you can get all the news, gossip, and updates from inside and outside the palace. From Harry and Meghan in California to Kate and William in the UK, along with King Charles, Queen Camilla, Prince Andrew, and the whole cast of characters. This coronation will be one for the ages, and we'll bring you every detail on every moment in just a few minutes, every day. Hear Palace Intrigue on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.